Welcome to the film project. If you haven't already checked it out, my friends and I shot a recent short film for our film class called Gone. This is the behind the scenes and a couple of lessons that we learned from shooting the film. This was my first film that I've fully prepped for and shot with an official shoot date. It hasn't been like a skit or whatever. This was very formal and for my film class, and I'd love for anyone watching to check this out because there probably will be some spoilers in this video. Jumping right into it, I wanted to give a quick overview of all of the gear that we used on this shoot. The majority of the film, 99% of the film, was shot on a GoPro Session 4. This camera was set at 60 frames per second at 720p and was used as a security camera within the house for most of the film. We achieved the security camera look by taking one of the Command sticky mounts, a two-sided foam mount, and we took an old GoPro mount that I had and basically just stuck it to the ceiling, screwed the GoPro into there, and then ran a charge cord through. I really wanted to use this camera over something like a DSLR because it's much lighter, so it can be attached to the ceiling, and also it has that wonderful wide angle lens, and you can crank down the quality in the frames per second. And overall, I think it looked pretty good. It was pretty realistic for a security camera. The majority of the film was lit with two large box lamps, one of which you see behind me right now. These box lamps were really incredible, except one of them had a short in the switch, which was really annoying, but these box lamps performed extremely well for what we wanted. Especially with the casing around the light, it made it extremely easy to manipulate it. We used a lot of poster boards. You can also see behind me right here, I'm using a poster board. It's just easy, you can tape it to it and whatever, and overall I was really pleased with them. We also used a couple smaller lamps and lights around the shoot, a couple LED panels, very small stuff. It was mostly house lamps that we had sitting around that didn't have shades or whatever. The lights came from our school, and we also borrowed this snowball mic and a heavier duty tripod. We didn't end up using the heavier duty tripod. On the shoot, we ended up attaching the GoPro to the ceiling rather than propping it up into the corner. It ended up being a lot simpler than we were expecting. To give you a little bit of insight into the software that we used, phone call was edited in Audacity. We achieved this phone call effect by first regulating the sound so it was all about the same volume. And then we added a high pass and low pass filter at 6 and 12 decibels, and then we put a high pass filter over everything at 24 decibels. It was a little bit too clean with just the high pass and the low pass at 6 and 12 decibels, so we ended up throwing that 24 on just to give it that extra phone call effect. We amplified the files between each step so then it would keep a consistent volume across the steps. One thing to look out for with the high pass and low pass filters to achieve an effect like this is it really does reduce the volume of the sound, so you're going to want to amplify it to get it back to where it was beforehand. We edited all of our video on Final Cut Pro X. This is the software that our school uses. Not an endorsement, it's kind of confusing, lots of things in weird places. I know a little bit about Adobe and I kind of like the layout just a little bit more. Also, the footage bank that it has in the top center left of the screen wasn't really optimal. I wasn't a huge fan because it doesn't show the file name, if I remember correctly, and it was just a little bit confusing because it just ordered them, and I really like looking at the file name because I numbered all of my files with a shot on the shot list, and then take it was, so then you really know what you're looking at. I wasn't a huge fan of this just because you couldn't tell if it was take 1, take 2, and we didn't use a slate or anything like that, so it caused a little bit of confusion. Ultimately, we just ended up with a finder window in the corner of the screen so we could see all the file names and dragging them in, even though we had already had them imported into the footage bank. Jumping right into day one. Day one was extremely chaotic in the fact that it was the most complicated of our shoot days. We did all of the shots from within the bedroom that day, and we shot it all during the daytime so we'd have a little bit extra time. To achieve this, we bought a bunch of black thin poster boards at Target. They're like 89 cents a pop. I'm not really sure how many we bought, but we ended up cutting them up and taping them to all of my windows so then the light didn't shine through my shades. It took probably a half hour to set up, and it was kind of weird because we also had to block off one of the doorways leading up to my room with a blanket with duct tape, which just kept falling. No matter how much duct tape we put on, it would just fall in the middle of our shot, the light would seep into the room, and we'd have to reshoot the whole thing. We also redressed my room as a girl's room, which meant we had to move everything not gender neutral out of my room or up against the walls so that it wasn't in frame, and then we ended up having to basically fill my room with my sister's stuff, which she wasn't a huge fan of, but ultimately it turned out alright. I didn't end up shooting any B-roll of this just because it was so complicated and we were trying to get everything so it looked pretty realistic. Once we had all of that picked out, we started shooting. Since the majority of the film is security camera footage, it ended up being a lot of walking back and forth, and it was kind of repetitive for our actors. It really made us lose interest, but after about 5 hours, we ground out all of the footage that we needed. Turning over into day two. Day two was our night shoot, and I didn't really think of this beforehand, but the sun actually sets a long time before it gets dark, so we ended up sitting around for about 45 minutes, doing nothing, just waiting for it to get dark, because it was our hallway shoot that we were going to do, and also our living room. The hallway, although it doesn't have any windows in it, it still had a lot of light seeping in from the big window in our staircase. It just looked really weird, so we had to wait until after it was dark, especially since the shots were supposed to take place during the night. We would have shot it with the bedroom shot on day one, except for the fact that it would be like $20 in poster board to black out that window. One of the major issues that we had was, since we're in high school and we weren't really supposed to go too late, so we ended up calling the shoot at about 10:30, which on a more serious shoot, I would have liked to pull an all-nighters instead of having to rush to get everything done. But I understand that my friend's parents wanted them home by a certain time, and we have city curfews and whatever, and so it didn't end up working like that, so we ended up having to rush everything done in about 2 to 3 hours. Day 3 was ultimately a mistake. It wasn't really supposed to happen, and you're going to see that's pretty common among day 4 and 5 as well. It didn't really have to happen, but it was just filling in a lot of the daytime shots that we didn't end up shooting because of our poor pre-production. So a lot of it is filler shots for whatever. Things that we didn't end up shooting because I went through the footage the night after day 2, and we are missing a lot of shots during the daytime part of our film. It was extremely poorly scheduled, and people showed up all at different times because I was trying to schedule with 2 other people, and I don't know what happened. I told them different times, and everyone showed up at a different time, and it was confusing and terrible. Day 4 was very similar to day 3. It was mostly a cleanup day. A lot of it was shot with my parents on day 4 because that just went with their availability, and so it was all of the shots of them running up and down the stairs after they find that their daughter's missing. We also did all of our audio recording that day, which we recorded in Audacity with a snowball mic. I've already mentioned that before. Day 5 is under no circumstances should have happened, but it did. We were extremely sloppy because there were a lot of things going on our shoot, and we hadn't really prepared with a schedule or anything. So we ended up having to go to day 5 because we had begun editing the film, and there were shots missing, or the shots shot at the wrong time of the day, which was just really terrible, and I feel bad that my group had to put up with that because ultimately I should have come up with some sort of schedule for us to shoot. Things that we had to reshoot were things with major continuity errors. We had some lighting equipment in a shot, and one shot was just shot at a completely wrong time of day. It was supposed to be during the day, and the windows were dark. I didn't want to go into a day 6, so we pieced together our entire film and final cut at school, and we went through the film and found out what footage we would need to reshoot, because a lot of these had wrong camera settings and all of these things that should have been avoided the first day and ultimately were not. So once we had the footage pieced together, we went through with a notebook and found all of the shots that we would like to reshoot. We organized them into a list. Thankfully, all of them were during the day, and we ended up going and shooting them with a proper schedule this time, which was a little bit weird, to be honest, because the first 4 days were just complete chaos, but we finally nailed it on day 5 and got everything done within a timely manner. It only lasted about an hour and a half.
So I cut the ties and I jumped the tracks for never to return.